Hello, hello, Ramnathan.
Yeah, Jay.
Can you hear me? Can your voice is a little bit key?
Is it clear now?
Yes, it is clear now.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
yeah,
So we'll start another 5 minutes. Huh?
sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
I will introduce you to the things and I'll correct the questions.
Hmm. Perfect. Yeah,
Let's wait for 5 minutes
sure, sure,
and I will create polls also and we can ask questions to them and I will collect questions and we'll go.
sure, sure.
Ramnathan, give a couple of minutes, like 5 minutes. People are joining.
Yeah, we will wait. Yeah.
Sure. I think people have joined. We'll go ahead. Okay.
Perfect.
So, good morning, good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to Regional Scrum Gathering after 2 years, like Hyderabad 2022. And I want to introduce about Ramanathan. Yeah. Ramanathan. So, he is a small intro about Ramanathan. He is a renowned enterprise agile coach. He helps in organizations in true potential and also organize towards a common goal, delivering service and products. And he also enjoys agile outside of IT. And also he works like he's experienced running freelance agile workshops like Scrum, XP, Kanban, Scaled Agile Framework, and XP practices. And he's an active employee, active like volunteer in agile communities in India and in Chennai also. So that's about Ramanathan. Over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ajay. So quickly getting into the session with a quick introduction. Thanks for the introduction, Ajay. And before getting in, I'm based out of Chennai. My name is Ramanathan again, and I work for a bank, Standard Chartered GBS, as an agile coach. And again, whenever we try to start with the conversation with anybody, try this. And this is something which would really give you an impression with other person whenever you try to add at least a good connect in terms of speaking. Want to give effective feedback, or at least you want to get effective feedback from anyone? We keep it real always, and that's the topic which I've chosen for the day, especially for the leaders, and it's a topic for leadership agility. Again, giving and receiving feedback is an art. So we're just going to see about and at least we're going to experience with few examples about the art of giving and receiving the feedback. Quickly getting in, right, whenever you try to have a conversation with anyone, try to have this conversation with an introduction. Is there anything I could do or stop doing that would make it easier to work with me? And this would be a good start to gain the feedback before you give feedback to someone. Try with this question, and this would really help be helpful in terms of your professional relationship across the organization with anyone. Whom do you work with, right? So getting on to the session, I would really go on to with this disclaimer. Everything that I've been going to share in this session is going to be my personal views and nothing related to the organization which I work with. Usually, I start my session with my own style, getting with good read, which would help you in terms of getting accustomed to this topic, or when you want to go and have a quick reference for your future learning or further enhancement towards the knowledge enrichment. These books will definitely help you because I've gone through the gist of these books at least to prepare for this session. Especially the session would be a highlight on radical candor. It's like an art of giving and receiving feedback in a candid way that can help you to be very clear at your feedbacks. So which can derive outcomes from individual, and that's the way how we are going to talk with. And this is an excerpt from the book Radical Candor by Kim Scott. She's like renowned person in terms of writing up this book, and also who has worked on a lot of ways to just give feedback and to get at least receive feedback in a constructive way, and that helps you a lot in terms of getting in high in the ladder when you are into leadership agility. And this book, Thanks for the Feedback, and also the Fearless Organization, will help you in terms of being psychologically safe in terms of giving or receiving feedback and making people to talk, which can help you in terms of having difficult conversations, and that can turn into a fruitful conversation. A feedback imperative will again tell you to deal with people in terms of how to be imperative in terms of having up your feedback in a very polite manner. Giving effective feedback is one of the Harvard Business Review Press book. It's just like 20-minute manager series, which would help you in terms of getting up conversations, being the best always when you try to engage with an audience. And moreover, uh, before we getting into this, I mean, like categorize this to leadership agility. So, what's a leader's job that you think? I just want you to quickly post in that chat, right? So, what you really think a leader's job would be in an organization? Again, you can feel free to just type whatever that you feel that comes to your mind. I want this leader to be a good leader, and that's what I feel a leader's job would be. So X or Y roles that you feel. Okay, show the path and walk the talk. Sumit Dameja. It's a very nice way and show the talk, and that's where they lead by example. Any other thoughts?
You can go ahead, Ram.
Yeah,
They will
and
like.
yeah, sure. So with that, right, what I foresee here in terms of people, like leaders have just to guide the team members to achieve the results. So wherever you see the result oriented people, uh, highly rely on leaders, and at least a leader's success would be on the numbers. So our leaders focus on the outcome, and it's by providing three things. One is the guidance to the team, again driving results very collaboratively, and again on the other one part is like building teams which is like stable. When I say stable, it's like understanding what motivates people, especially avoiding burnouts within the team, and especially the conflicts that arises in terms of the diversity, and kill the boredom in the team, and to make the team engaged in terms of the conversation, and again being the team to be cohesive in terms of the discussion. So whenever you see like a boss or unliking a boss in environment setup, the three things that comes to your mind is like a person who is going to guide you properly. The person can have a price and criticism, and again, when I say price and criticism, these two are very important factor, because price is something that can motivate a person, and there is a false price too, which can kill a person's at least growth in an organization to an extent. Criticisms, yes, constructive criticisms are often a good critic, and criticisms are always positive, but the criticisms in terms of a person which hurts the personal feeling, and something that is beyond a limit, it hurts. So a leader should know what kind of dosage is required to make sure that things are in place. Moving on, like you can't do anything without like building a strong relationships. When I say relationships, it's like building up the trust in terms of an individual, which is the base for any relationship. In an organizational set, the professional relationship you want to build in any individual is again, uh, you want to just be very careful in terms where radical candor comes in. You have your very two essentials that you would keep in mind is like care for the person personally and challenge them directly, and two extremes which is equal to radical candor, because you're going to just care for them personally in the same way you're going to challenge them directly, and which is going to be the two dimensions of radical candor, which we are going to discuss again in detail, right? So what is caring of for a person personally, and what is challenging them directly? Again, whenever you are in it's like you want to keep in mind that it's not a business, it's deeply personal, and you cannot always talk about business to a person when you're trying to build a rapport. If it's like individual contributor, and if you want to just achieve some outcome, you cannot directly go and say I'm going to be purely talking about to you in a business front. You might have similar wavelength in terms of your hobbies, your which typically we start conversations with, right? So again, when we keep it very professional, right, it always denies the fact that we are human. So if you keep everything always professional, it denies the fact that we are human, and you want to just talk only about professional things. At least like it needs a personal involvement at times to know about the other person, at least to an extent. So bring your wholesale to work will not work in your caring personal stuff. So only when you actually care about the other person, you can build relationship. And when I'm saying that it's a relationship, it's a professional relationship we are trying to maintain in a place where it would long last forever for your at least a career growth a person sorts in an organization. Challenging directly is like again you give the hard feedback, but also the good feedback for them to take over. So how many of you have given the hard feedback to an individual, saying like upfront, you say something that the other person gets hurt, and they would tend to at least give back a feedback to you in a nasty way. When I say nasty way, it's like you said something ill about me directly in front. It's like a hard feedback which we classify. See, I would say like it's only you don't know anything about agile. It's something that is if I will not say it's a feedback, it's a critic. So if I'm going to give this critic to a person, what would the other person think of? Is it only you who knows everything in this world, or it will it be a justification that comes back? So I don't even want to listen to your feedback, or a critic. It can be an aggressive tone that comes back, right? I'm going to the next level. So I'll tell you what kind of feedback it is, and what are we going to try, what are we trying to prove here. So if you are saying, before you go into a feedback and then like share a feedback with a person, ask for the feedback first. It is good enough to know the other person's view first on your way of working, and then like tend to give feedback next once you receive the feedback. It's receiving the first and then giving the next. And always ensure that you show your care enough for that person. And it doesn't mean that like I challenge you directly. It's not only the challenge. So it's first the price and then the critic. And tend to always like admit that you can also be wrong, right? So it is something that you cannot be always right. So have that in mind when you're challenging a person directly, because when we challenge the person directly on the other end, you might tend to be challenged again, and be ready for that. And because you're challenging the vulnerabilities for the person, right? So that might affect his weakness, and that might touch his ego. So radical candor is like more of talking about with care, but you challenge them directly and tend to at least tell them that what it is something that you want to change with them, so that they can give you a better result, or they can walk with you with a better vision. So that's what we are going to talk about in radical candor, right? So what your teammates like when they trust you, right? What you're more likely to visualize in them, right? You're going to just focus on results, right? You'll also accept and act on your price and criticism, right? When I say act on price and criticism, you'll always think on what to price and what to critic in terms of any person who is moving on with you. And especially when you have your teammates who trust you, you will first go with price and then the criticism, but criticism would be the more lesser one. And again, tell what they really think about, and then what you're doing well and not doing well, and ask them first, and then you just go ahead with your feedback on them. Like, so ask them to tell you what they really think about you first, and that will really be helpful in terms of changing yourself in the way of accustoming everybody in the work, and engaging your at least the same behavior with one another will always be helpful in terms like it cannot be everywhere the same sort of behavior. It can be at one point in time you tend to accept the other person's behavior too, and we cannot seek 100% perfection at all time, and there might be lags where we tend to adjust and be empathetic towards, and then like change them over a course of time, and to the standard or the norm that the organization has. And that's where the organization culture is built upon, right? So embrace their role on your team, so your role is also being embraced by the other person. So always have this in mind, so that you can likely to move with them very easily. We are getting into this radical candor, again, how to care personally and challenge directly with the other person. But before we begin, we have few thumb rule. Again, the name of each quadrant here refers to the guidance, but not the personality trait of that individual, and it is not to be used to label anybody. Everyone spends more time in each quadrant to understand what is something that we can improve. If we see such pattern on us, and it's like this might be your guidance, and you might fall in trap, and you can learn and what can be improved. Or if you see such if you fall in such category, what is something that you can improve, rather than taking it as a personality trait. It's never a personality trait. We are just going to look at each category and how we are going to just be in that, and how profound we can give a feedback to a person. The first one is obnoxious aggression. So what is obnoxious aggression, right? Whenever someone has, right, been aggressive, and they're not they are just like tend to be aggressive towards your action and want to dominate you, and they're not willing to accept you at any point in time. If you are a person who's in at least intellect in an organization, who's proving with your numbers, but someone who doesn't like it, right, on above in the ladder, I can quote your boss, your subordinate, or even a person who is a fellow colleague to you who doesn't like your way of working, or he's like jealous of your way of working or whatever, and he thinks that like he want to aggressively give some feedback to you, we term that as obnoxious aggression. They criticize first without showing you care. Any examples you have seen in your life, the way how it was being given, like I would say obnoxious aggression is quite at least familiar. So have you ever been in this category? So experience this category with someone, with your boss, with your subordinate, or with your colleague. Have you ever faced this challenge? When I say like they criticize you more than giving you a care, or giving you while giving the feedback, they criticize you more than giving you anything. When I say criticism, it's like, hey, he is the one who's very genius, and it is something which is a, I would say it is like stabbing at least like very aggressively, saying like you know everything, but it's not the way how what they mean. Yeah, and that demotivates a lot. Yeah, Sumit, it's of course it demotivates a lot because it's an aggression that's been shown at last, telling that you will not be able to grow on, because this is the feedback which I'm going to give you based on my aggression towards you. And debilitating is like, again, I'm going to just tell you that this is your weakness and I know that weakness. Yeah, and very I would say it's an indirect, yeah, it's passive and indirect aggression. They will not show you directly, and that rather than challenging you directly, they indirectly challenge you in terms of showing their aggression. You're right, Hari Krishna. So towards the extreme of aggression, they tend to belittling certain things, being silly at times, or publicly embarrassing, which is not acceptable at any working environment. So the boss is criticized to humiliate is again, it's not going to elevate you at any point within the peers, right? It's going to put you down. Again, the bosses discourages price as it's like babysitting your ego. And you cannot babysit people's egos, right? And it is something that's going to play around, and that's a very wrong mindset. You're right, Sumit. So this mindset is going to, yeah, this is like professional killers. Yeah, they are the one who are politically strong to play around with your emotion, and they know your weakness, and they typically play around with your vulnerability. If you are exposing your vulnerabilities very clearly, those people are the one who plays with your vulnerability and then tend to attack you in terms of their feedback. And this obnoxious aggression is something that is going to at least have criticism first and then the price next. They will criticize you first, which will obviously demotivate you, and then they will price, which is not going to be a actual price, and right, that's going to be a false price at last, because it's going to stab a person and then give a medicine to him. So obnoxious aggression is something which you tend to avoid. At least I would say a good example, right? I've seen two people who have worked with me on in my earlier organizations. So I'm not quoting the name of the organization, but there were few people who had some personal problems in their life, which they have exposed to their managers. So whenever there is a discussion, this is a good feedback of obnoxious aggression. I know that you are having a lot of personal problems in your life. In spite, you have worked really great. Do you think that this is a right feedback for a person during a performance appraisal? Never, because this is going to be a critic. Because I'm just like hitting him on his personal stance, and then trying to just console him that you're working really great. That price is of no use to me, and right, it neutralizes the price. Yes, of course, Sumit got the right word. It's like you neutralize that at last, and then say, yeah, you're having a lot of personal problems. He might have tend to forget that, and then coming up to the work. And what bothers with the feedback? You can say that I'm working good. What puts that particular criticism before, which is showing my vulnerability just to take your dominance out, right? You're dominating there, saying like you have a lot of personal problems, I know that. Yes, you know that. What is stopping you to know that, right? And you're tending to give that criticism first and then go for that price, which is absolutely we would not say, we would never say him a no nonsense personality at our work. We would be an obvious person who is tending to knock your vulnerability and then lock you there. So this kind of feedback, if you receive at any point in time, try to stay away from their feedback, and you don't need to take their feedback at any point in time. You can say okay, and take up only the price, not the criticism, because that criticism is something which is on your vulnerability. And moving on to the next one, we are going to just look at four categories, and this is manipulative insincerity. This is something which I've marked in red, because it is like, again, they don't even care about the person and to challenge them directly, but it is like they give price or criticism, but then they don't want you to be liked, and then they want to just give it as a false apology or admiration, but it's just like a gossip. I will not give the feedback to you. Whenever a false allegation comes on you, right? So I would just jump in directly and then say, yeah, is it okay, is it Raj? Yeah, he might have done that. I know that he's a very good worker, but at times I have seen him being into this trap. So I know him very well, and this has happened to me a lot. So I would say he has a lot of this attitude which I was about to share, and he might be waiting for the situation to share with some group. So there might be two or three people who are ready to share such feedback. So he might be waiting for that situation, and if he gives such feedback, though positive or negative, it might be a false apology or admiration. That kind of feedback is something which is going to be a slow poison to us. So you can take that feedback, but find the people, and that they are the one who's going to break the trust very easily. They are the one who might stab you at the back when you're weak. So any point in time, I have seen manipulative sincerity being done when people are like tending to have some allegation on some person, when there is a poll or feedback 365 comes in place, right? This is very essential in terms, right? Feedback 365 is something where you can give it an any person, right? So it's open to everybody to give feedback on one person. So it usually happens on manipulative sincerity when you do this feedback 365 together, and this can be cooked up when there are a lot of people who wants to give the feedback at again one person, and if he is targeted, they will be able to give it directly. And this kind of stab, I would say, more than a bias, it's like it's like a grudge which has been hold for certain reason on one person. It might be an intellectual gap, or it might be a positional gap, or it might be a social respect gap, or anything that can be in the Abraham Maslow's theory. So he might be in elite class. He don't like that person being in that elite class. So I just like think that okay, he is somewhere superior, or I would say some sort of bias. I agree with Hari Krishnan, and some sort of bias, but not too much of biased ways of targeting a person, but more than the bias, it's like a jealous or waiting for a situation. I'll not attack him directly. Yeah, threat perception to the position. Of course, more than I would say more than a job uh, profile, or the insecure feeling of a job profile, I would say it is like something that I'm jealous of, but I'm not going to share something to that person. I don't have guts to at least give him a valid feedback up front, right in front of his face. But I have a method to just stab him at the back when there are group of people. So it's like a person where I can go along, give my feedback, which makes the person spoiled to an extent, and that makes him to be completely demotivated to mow along. So this is something like your PIPs, right? The performance improvement plan for certain people. So who doesn't work well? So especially there are PIPs in certain organizations where it is imposed on a person who at least work well. How to handle this, Sumit Kumar? It is like tending on this false apology. It is like you really know that person is going to give you a false apology, and you know with their facial gestures. So they usually don't give this, at least when it is in a group. At least they will tend to give this anonymously, but whenever it comes in as a feedback to you, this manipulative insincerity surprises you as a feedback, because that will not be directly in face to face, and it would be something or the other which would be anonymous as a group feedback. So if you receive such feedbacks, this is something which is not going to help us. So this kind of feedbacks to handle better, like tend to avoid such people. When I say avoid such people, you might get such kind of insincere feedbacks which is not going to help you, which is going to be way generic. For an example, I might say, yeah, he has this attitude. I have seen him a few instances, he have done the same to me as well. So I hope he might be the person who is with that attitude, I'm very sure. So if you are giving such feedback, it's not something direct to you, but I'm giving a feedback to a certain person which is indirectly affecting you. I would say this kind of admiration or this kind of false apology is something that needs to be avoided. But keep an eye on them, and their feedback is not going to help you, and we are going to just keep them aside, understand them. We are staying away from such feedbacks, right? Moving on to ruinous empathy. When you feel that this ruinous empathy is something which is not effective feedback, when people is because this is not purposeful, and it would take, at least it would make the person feel better. They will say, like, you're really working well. I am admired with your work and your inspiration to our work. All this are ruinous empathy, because they are going to give you this feedback. But when you see it might make the person feel better, but to push them to growth, it will not help, because it is like they are like, they will give you a vague positive comment, but they are not going to really support the team for a longer run. Because a very good example for ruinous empathy is like, you have a very good manager who gives you a good appraisal. At any point in time, he says like, you are very good in your work, and we love your nature of work, and you are a super performer. At last, when it comes to monetary terms, he says you are meeting only the expectation. You said you are an inspirational person, and you said you are a role model, and you said you're exceptionally performing well. What stopped me to gauge me my performance in terms of more than what has been marked as meeting my expectations? So is it something that is typical to ruinous empathy? Because he empathized and he said, I'm a role model, but you at last ruined, and you empathized only for that instance, and you didn't give me anything more than what I wanted to. So ruinous empathy is like, they would be empathizing, but they will be so good and sweet, but at last you will see the real face. A very good example is typical mismatch, or the performance appraisal discussions with your manager, who would have given a very kind enough feedback, or at least when this happens in a scale, like when we have opened up a certain poll with almost a few individuals, we had a very good response in terms of mid-year appraisals, right? When we had a mid-year discussion, it was told to be very exceptional performance, and they were in a dream that it would be uh, like they will be marked as in like surpassing the expectations of the organization, and they will be marked as a role model, and then would be given up a very good hike in terms of their role. And the promotions, usually it happens during promotions, because it is like you say, it's very great. Yeah, it usually in these days, there are certain organizations who does a very good performance feedback on feedback 365, and that feedback 365 is marked with your performance objectives, which in line will give connected uh, feedback to your key objectives, and which marks the scoring or the weightage to it. But there are certain organizations which is inauthentic, and again, as Hari Krishnan says, like it lacks integrity, because ruinous empathy is going to kill your integrity at last, because you're surprised when you're fired, or like when you're thrown out, you really actually understand this is not the actual feedback that has been given. So it's something which is which is colorful words that has been talked, but not the actual truth which was revealed when it was shared to you. So whenever there is a ruinous empathy, there is no trust on either side. This is just like having up a poison in the tongue, but then like giving up a sweet word out as a saliva. So it's like a snake who has a poison, but then throwing out the sweet out. But you actually realize once it is like within, like you understand that it's a poison after some time, which is painful. So all this three, obnoxious aggression or manipulative insincerity or ruinous empathy, is always something that you need to at least understand. You don't need to say that no to no to such feedbacks, because those feedbacks are something that you cannot stop. People might tend to share their feedback in different means. Accept and assimilate that feedback, understand which is constructive to you, and then tend to avoid the rest of the feedbacks which is not something that is a booster to you. Or we would say, if something is killing up your motivation, tend to avoid that feedback and then try to move on and look for some radical candor feedback. And when I say radical candor, it's like a candid feedback which we tend to have. So relationships, not power, that drive you forward. So anything that is there, think of your power is not going to drive you forward. It's only the relationship which is going to drive you forward. The more feedback between the people on a team, the more success that the team is likely to have. So always tend to have feedbacks with your team members. Tend to have like candid feedback about you first, and then once you start by getting a feedback first, then just start to give feedback for the other person. When you tend to give feedback, start with the price, not with the criticism. Criticisms can be given later, but then you should understand whether the person has really built the trust on you, so that you can criticize that person. But the criticization is like again with a limit. When you move to criticism, make sure you understand there is a difference between the radical candor and the obnoxious aggression. So anytime if you tend to use criticism to an extent and misuse that, you will fall in a trap of obnoxious aggression. Because when you criticize first, people will think that you're using obnoxious aggression against them. So be very cautious enough in because radical candor talks about challenge directly on the second stance, on the second dimension. The first dimension is always care personally for them, which would help you to give a candid feedback for them. And in this way, it is very clear any person who is tending to have a conversation with the other person and tend to build a relationship professionally in an organization have always room for feedback. So first ask for the feedback, receive the feedback, assimilate what can be course corrected in you, and then tend to give the feedback to the other person. Because I've received a lot of feedbacks which is very vague in terms of like, see, I listened to your audio, your audio was not like that great, or it's not some sort of things is missing, some elements are missing. So these are vague feedback. So when they say something is missing or some, if they are not very specific to it, right, don't take that feedback, and they are not going to be candid feedback for you to work on. So any feedback that is there, look whether it is going to be caring for you personally, and then it should challenge you directly to get motivated for it and work on. So that's where radical candor stands. And again, let's quickly have all this four categories with an example. So Raj is a person who deployed a feature which has some bugs in production. So it's not his first time, he doesn't test his work, and that's the fault, which is the root cause. But when I go with obnoxious aggression, what I would do is I would say, when you see these bugs on production, right, your reaction would be you scream in the office or very loud, who the hell delivered this? Raj? Yes. I thought this is Raj. How many times do I have to tell you to test your code before you deliver, Raj? Openly shout in front of everybody. This is not a feedback, but this is an obnoxious aggression towards a person, right? And again, your sincerity in terms of it, your manipulative sincerity is going to be like this. You gossip with your team members. You're not going to talk to Raj. You're not going to scream. You're not going to at least empathize. You're going to just gossip to your teammates saying, dude, I know that, right? Raj deployed a buggy feature to production again. Do you know that? This guy has no clue about what is testing and quality. And he's a man like he don't know, and you giggle, and it is like you make fun of the other person, this is something which is not within Raj who has done this, or if it is a feedback which you care personally and challenge him directly, you can do this, but they don't have guts to challenge directly. They go and gossip with the other person. This insincerity is something that stabs behind, and that's why we had an image which stabs the other person at the back. It's not going to help you to bring an outcome for the team, but it derives a person to be a very uh, having a very wrong attitude in terms of gossiping to the other person, which is not at all a mechanism for feedback. Again, the third behavior is ruinous empathy. This behavior is like, I'm just giving you a quick example on ruinous empathy, right? You see the bugs, you know that like he is causing the issues to the team. You know that Raj is doing that repeatedly, but you don't want him to feel uncomfortable. If you go and raise the issues, he might feel bad. So what you will do is like you postpone until he gets fired from the office. So till then, like you wait. Okay, let Raj be like this. You don't care, and you empathize for him. Oh, Raj is like a guy, like this guy. I know this guy is going to be like this, but let me be calm. He will never learn what he does wrong, and this it is something that you're not pointing his mistakes. You're not criticizing him, and you're not at all giving him an opportunity for him to change as well with your feedback. So you're being silent and then tending to empathize with Raj, but it's a ruinous empathy, which is going to ruin his life unless if he's going to fire on that day. It's going to be a feedback for him from someone else, but not from your trustworthy person who is in the organization. Radical candor, again, it's a private conversation with Raj. You call Raj separately, talk to him with facts. Raj, you have done this several times, and these are all the facts. And what are all the effects that has happened? So facts and effects together, and then you say that this issue keeps on happening. So how can we pair program to fix this bug together? If you are a developer, or what? How may I help you? If you are someone who is not into his uh, like role or similar roles, you can ask how may I help. That will obviously help, and that's where radical candor takes a turn in terms of other behaviors. So aggression or insincerity or ruinous empathy, all this going to be a behavior that's not going to help for a candid feedback. Every other thing is a feedback mechanism, but those feedback mechanisms are something which is not going to help me directly. Okay, and that's why they say sandwich your feedback. Yes, of course, sandwiching the feedback is one of the good techniques. Start with your price first and then slowly criticize, but your criticism should always have uh, a, a slow poison. But when I say slow poison, it should be a poisonous measures are always not bad, and it is something that is needed for an hour. Sometimes poison treats to be a medicine. So positive outlook, positive start. Yes, Sumit, you've said rightly. So look for a positive outcome. So that's where we are going to look at, and that's where radical candor is going to be very helpful. Moving on to the next one. So, how do a good radically candid feedback should be? Be very hearty in your approbation. When I say approbation, your approval or an engagement, and lavish in your praise. So, Dale Carnegie, a person who is like well known for the art of public speaking, has very clearly, even for the emotional intelligence, this is a base. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your price. Always be lavish in your price, because you're not going to price too much, but while having up a radically candid feedback, for this good radically candid feedback, we need to be humble first, because whenever we see right the feedback, you're receiving it first. So all the other three behaviors might pop up first. People might tend to be aggressive if you are a good intellect across the organization, or if you are if they want to just giggle around and then say some gossips around it, they will just go and do that. So be humble with the other three behaviors, because we would get emotionally at least aggressive in terms of such behavior because it's damaging your personal ego. And again, be helpful in all means by the other person, because radical candor is to care personally for the other person. So be helpful in your feedback. If you feel that your feedback is not going to be helpful for the other person, better don't give feedback for the other person. And your feedback should be immediate. And if it is again like for the thing that has happened almost 2 to 3 months back, don't give feedback. And feedback should be immediate, saying this is the instance and this is the way. I just want to give feedback because this is the way I've been. Always quote your fact and effect, which will be helpful. So give feedback in person. When I say more in person, don't share it anonymously, or there are places where you share tending to be anonymous in on a scale of 1 to 5, saying how this person has been helpful. Usually that is good for a training, but not for a person to improve at once. Again, price in public but criticize in private. Because criticisms touch your ego first. You don't need to price a person because he don't mind if even if you don't price. But criticisms are often playing around your personal space, and that takes up an ego, and that takes up a big turn. And don't personalize your feedback too much, because when we want to care personally, you can give a feedback which is not too personalized. Because when you're intruding in a personal space, the feedback would take a turn, and that might be obviously an aggression turned back to you, and that might come back in an obnoxious aggression back. So again, the purpose of feedback is not to dwell in the past. If someone have given you a nasty feedback or a harder feedback, don't think about it. Try to at least look at whether is it really going to add value. If not, ignore and then look for the past. Don't look for the past, and look whether it is going to add value, or don't look at the past and retain there and tend to move on for the future. Because there are people who might tend to give feedback in a way where they tend to hurt you at times, because this manipulative insincerity can be done at times with the person. Rather than giggling or gossiping, it can be done quite straightforward in a person, saying like, this is where I want to tell you, you had an attitude and I just had an example earlier. And then he might tend to at least hurt you at times. So feedback is most helpful when it provides detailed information and the action. So if you're just giving information about detailed information about what you want to just tell, that person will not help. Tell what action are you trying to impart from your feedback, so that the person can really work on that and come back. Though there are many types of feedback, not all feedbacks are useful. So if someone is giving you a rough and vague feedback, ignore, and you don't need to take up that feedback always. Useful feedback will always respond to specific actions. So if you are in for performing one's job, it is essential to get feedback from the other person. Because any person's we would say that it's a perception of all individual put together as a team. It helps you to improve yourself, because in the other person's perception you might be wrong, which you can tend to neutralize, and as a team you tend to swim along, and that's where we win a race. So that's where we tend to learn from each individual who are working with us, right? So giving feedback, keep this in your mind. Start with positives and strengths first while you give feedback to the other individual. And don't go overboard with your feedback. If your other person, look for facial gestures of the other person. If your feedback is welcomed, give feedback in a positive way and in the same tone. And don't cut short if the person is interested to gain feedback from you. But if you feel that there are rough facial gestures on the other end which feels that they are overboard, tend to stop and cut it off. Be specific with your feedbacks. Don't involve everything together. And then if you want to corner one, don't at least put all the situation together and give one feedback. That might confuse the other individual. Use a sandwich approach always. And as I said, have price at the start and end. In between, give a small critic that can help him to prompt and change. And be very prompt in your feedback. Not when I say prompt, it's something that happens on the other day. Just right away call him and then say, I just want to give this feedback. But before giving feedback, tend to ask for a feedback and receive it first. Because that helps you, because you have been listening to the other person. So that helps, and the other person would obviously open up and ask, do you have any feedback for me? So that's how feedback are often exchanged. Make it an ongoing exercise. Every have a if you have a team, or if you have a group of people whom you work with, have a regular practice of asking a feedback. It doesn't need to be always written, or a place where it can be at least documented. You can just have a feedback verbally, understand what is their pulse or the nuances when you work with them, and it keep it often on as an ongoing exercise. It can be a cadence which you can maintain for feedbacks. And for receiving feedback, appreciate the feedback that you received, though you like it or not. Because the point is, whenever the other person tends to give you a feedback, right? The art of feedback is like, you get that, it means that like they are tending to give something to us. So we at least, they are taking up an effort to give just tell us something that we can improve. So for that gesture, or the for that gratitude, let's share our own gratitude for them, saying, I appreciate the feedback, whatever that you have given. So in the same way, don't throw it back saying with your justifications. When I would not say excuses or making excuses, I would say don't justify, saying you have given me this feedback and I cannot accept this feedback because I'll add X or Y points behind the same, and I don't want that. And that's not the intent of receiving feedback. If he says something you don't like it, as I said, like you don't find that feedback useful, just get this and then move on. Take your feedback seriously if it is something that is on your personality trait, or something that has uh, intentionally hurted the other person. So have this in mind when you're being or be mindful when you're trying to repeat that, or avoid those repetitions in life, because those things are something which others don't want to see in us. And do a self evaluation often, like if you have repeatedly getting a feedback on certain things or behavior that you have gotten, look at that at times. Because in my childhood, I have been like, people used to talk like, you never listen. So that's a feedback which often come to me, and I have worked on that to an extent, maybe. But that's a self evaluation which I have done in either with my relations, or with my peers, or with some people whom I have worked in early in my life. So in my early days, like they would give me this feedback which was valid, and I tend to have this and worked on, and it's a self evaluation which often you think on, and then like understand, okay, why this particular repeated feedback is coming to me, and is it something which I will need to work on, and tend to work on this. And always have this feedbacks or as an opportunity to learn in your life, because these people are somewhere had an agenda in their life, and they are having you as a player, or one among the player, for you to interact and then have a conversation. So go for a follow up and understand, you have given me this feedback, so how do you feel now? Do you see any sort of improvement? Have a follow up with that, so which will have a good intention to close the conversation, and which will help us to understand. So few chats, let me look. Okay, give me 1 minute.
Please vote. Please
Yeah,
submit the polls for Ramanathan's feedback, so that it help both of us. It help Ramanathan to improve further. So polls are open now. And
yeah,
do you have any questions?
that's my feedback. That's your feedback for me.
Yes, yes.
And
And also, you want to have any questions? Please ask here in the chat room. We can answer.
before moving on to the next slide, I'm just looking at the chat. What about feed forward instead? How can we promote? Okay. Uh, like feed forward are usually like it's a similar turn. Like we can promote uh, ourselves in terms of understanding what it is, what next to me, and what is the best for me, and things often. These kind of things are like innovative ways to at least share and listen from other individuals, which I would say, Hari Krishnan. So Sumit, you're asking for Ritika. Okay, had candid feedback, if not measurable, about soft skills. Okay, you could show the person how lack of soft skills. Okay, understanding, it's like unless and until, as you said, it's not hurting the other person's image or growth. Everything is like it is like the choice of words you use. And in the same way, not more about the soft skill, I would say about understanding the other person. Like, if the same feedback is given to you, will you take in the same way? Think of that once and then tend to share the feedback. That shows the genuinity and true care, as you said, Sumit. And appreciate the input. Okay. Again, so the future is always on getting what it is. If someone is sparing time for me to at least give the feedback for me, that's the way how I would think on how it works and what it is for us. So in that way, I would ultimately say that any feedback that comes in life, for us, it's something that the other person is willing to give us. Take it honestly. If they tend to give this obviously in a moment to show their aggression, or if they are manipulatively insincere to their feedback, or if they are ruinously empathizing you, it's okay. Take that feedback, but you don't need to work on that, and those feedbacks don't have actions in the life. And you can think of what if the positive critics that they have given about you, because there will obviously be one positive critic about us in any of the feedbacks that's been shared. So keep that in mind as a motivating factor and move on. And that's where the art of giving and receiving feedback stands in. And I would really I've enjoyed this book, Radical Candor, because this is something which has given enough insights in terms of how to understand if someone is giving up a feedback, what to take and what not to take in life. And this is really helpful for me in terms of fulfilling the expectations from the others, and the person who are having a different perceptions in life about us. So you might give different perceptions or different chances for others to at least tell you what can be corrected. So that's a free coach coachy model that you can expect from others, so that whatever that you want to take in as an improvement action, you can take out and work on it. Or whatever that you want to ignore, tend to ignore and then move on, it's a choice is up to us to choose it. So that's where the art of giving and receiving feedback stands in. And I'm open for questions. And thanks for the opportunity, Regional Scrum Gathering Hyderabad. It's a nice forum for me to at least share my thoughts or insights, and I'm happy for it. Yeah, thanks, Sumit, for that. I love the way you started suggesting. Yes, and that works in my organization setting as well. I've started living with it. After that, any conversation I start with people, I would say, "How may I help you?" or "How I can be of help?" or "What can be done to add or remove whatever that you don't like?" or maybe before. It is like something that we can set the boundaries before we begin to have a conversation with an individual.
Ramanathan, one
Open for questions. Yeah.
open for questions. And one more thing also, Sumit Damaja is saying that in my humble, straightforward works well with mature people. So, um,
Yeah, I missed that somehow. Rather than being a denial, look for the ways to pass the hurdle or problem and improve. Yeah, of course, it is like the feed focused on future is like work well for with mature people, because unless this is something which is a jargon.
yes,
So a feed forward is something that's a jargon that comes in. It's again the way how we can. This is relentless improvement which we are talking about. So, which is a basic part where work on your actions, have actions is the same way where they are tending to have feed forward. So, anything that is coming in, I would say you understand the issue, look for the root cause, change, and then go forward. And if it is coming from 5 or 6 people, if someone or if 2 or 3 people are telling that there is a problem with me, then I have to change look at what is the problem that I have, and then I have to change it. If there are one person who's repeatedly doing that and then like damaging out, I can ignore. But if it is more than 2 or 3, I need to change. Yeah, radical candor is a psychologically safe environment where there is a trust and you can use that. And again, radical candor will tend to believe because you are criticizing in private, not in public. So Hari Krishnan, I would say that this is really a safe environment to share the feedback, because people will tend to have uh, like accept the criticisms, and you're going to prize them in public, and then in private you're going to just criticize, saying this is something which I want to change. So people will obviously feel safe, because you're not shaming them in front of public, and you're not saying them, you're not playing with their egos. So it's like valid feedback which you are going to share. Yeah, of course, senior people often don't open up, but it is like when we tend to receive their feedback, right? It's like humanizing organizations, or it's like the way how we have the humanity in place. We are starting with the feedback, and I'm receiving the feedback first, and then I'll tend to give feedback if you are really okay to take my feedback. So if the person is if the person is senior, and if they're not open, I would ask the feedback and move on, because it's going to gain me out. I'm not going to give him a feedback at any point in time. For probing them, I would say, like, do you want me to give a feedback based on my interaction with you? And if they like, you can. If they say no, it's well enough. You don't need to give always a feedback in written. It's okay, because usually when there is a people who are high in the ladder, they will be obviously open to feedback, and they will ask for the feedback. Tend to make your feedback so candid, they will love your feedback, even if you are not equal to their experience, and if they don't. Yeah. uh, uh, Feedback to a junior due to fear, yes, of course, but in radical candor, I would say you're going to ask them a feedback, understanding like how it is. But you it is the trust which you try to build with them, and understanding you receive a feedback. And if they are a junior, they are scared on, they will be either giving you a, a ruinous empathy. They will not talk to you. But this is the way how we train to give feedback to people, even if they are junior or senior. It is irrespective of age, because we even get feedback from kids. So, Hari Krishnan, are we vulnerable and courageous with senior people to open up to us and asking the right questions? Of course, when you are giving your weakness out, you are vulnerable, and they might use obnoxious aggression, tend to make you feel inferior. But be mindful enough in terms of understanding what is required for us to take up and what to ignore, because we don't need always to be courageous or vulnerable to understand and talk with senior people. Senior people will always give advices. Those advices can often be taken as feedback, because they are sharing their experience knowingly or unknowingly.
That's it, I think, Ramanathan.
Yeah,
I thank you. We thank Ramanathan for for your wonderful session, and hope everyone has got the answers now.
yeah,
And
I have almost replied to all the chat questions.
yes, yes.
I didn't miss any. If so, you can connect me in LinkedIn, or we are connected anyway. I will be in the chat till the end of the
You can.
stage, so you can reach me. Yeah,
Yes, yes. And thank you for the
thank
wonderful
you.
session, and thanks for the presentation. And I think everyone and polls. Please go ahead and submit the polls. That's it, Ramanathan.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity for the
Thank
regional
you.
Scrum Gathering Hyderabad. Thank
Thank
you.
you.